this week's episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Of course, if you're just catching up on recordings and all that kind of stuff, then it's whatever week it is for you. For those of you who missed me for 2 weeks, it's because I was off on a much needed vacation and got a chance to see in other parts of the world and all that wonderful stuff. And I don't know if you've been following Kuden and some of these other things that I'm doing. I did this past week, and I will be doing a couple of them coming up here. The cop eyes, the ninja eyes, always paying attention to danger, self-defense mistakes people make, those kind of things. But either way, right, we're here with Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday, and the topic for this week, advanced stick fighting. I had somebody post a comment on one of the previous episodes where I said these episodes this format, this training format, is not where I'm the dancing monkey, right? Demonstrating things. That's for other things, right? That's for our Friday virtual class, all that stuff. This is for the tactical and strategic theory to help you bump things up. So what am I really looking at during this advanced stick fighting training? Well, what we're going to be taking a look at are 4 problems that we can have in our attempt at taking basic models, introductory models, right? My teacher, Soka Hatsumi, has always said that the technique is not the lesson. The technique is not, it's nothing more than an indicator as to where you need to begin, or it's an example of where to start, right? So what we're really looking at doing is being able to take our training from basic, and actually even before that, right? It's something in Japanese known as kihon no kihon, basics, or the fundamentals of the fundamentals, right? And I know that gets a little kind of weird. What is that, right? All the way to being street ready, right? And that leads us to some of these things where, beginner mind, regardless of rank, regardless of the color of whatever piece of cloth somebody has around their waist, just like the term age has nothing to do with maturity, just like degrees have nothing to do with intelligence, class has nothing to do with the size of someone's bank account, right? You can be professional or classy or whatever and have a very low bank account. You can be filthy rich and be an arrogant asshole, right? The color of someone's belt, this is just an indicator of lessons learned, hopefully, lessons learned, being assessed, and being graded at, or from a perspective that you have this, at least at this minimum set of things at a minimum level of proficiency for the teacher to promote you to that level. Is that always the case? No. Okay. But beginner mind, right? That rank has nothing to do with the mindset. Someone can be very, very technically proficient with skills and still look at those things, engage with those things, and think about those things just like a beginner, right? Just like somebody who doesn't know any better, okay? And again, right, it's part of the teacher's responsibility to not only teach the material, but to teach the material appropriate to the level where the student is. And there comes a time when you need to break the models. You need to forget the models. Not that you can forget them. They just move from left brain memorization to muscle memory where you can't forget them, but you're, right? So a lot of these lessons sound philosophical, but if we don't understand what's being conveyed, then it's just shit, right? So anyway, so what I'm going to be taking a look at is we're going to start the ball rolling, so to speak, right? And again, I'm inviting everybody, make it to that virtual training on Friday, because as I go through these, I'll be talking about what we're going to be covering, right? But what we're going to be doing is the active part of the lesson, okay? So what we're going to be taking a look at is how do we go from these basic models and learn what the models are conveying so that we and those techniques are street ready against one or more attackers on the street doing whatever they do, and we're able to use this stuff as is, not mixing it with high school wrestling, not mixing it with pseudo boxing or whatever, to be able to deal with that person. Okay, that's called skill proficiency, not I learned more shit to add to shit I already knew and I'm gonna mix it together and hope for the best. Okay, So, but that's my take, right? If I'm not your guy, right, there's a back button on your browser. Anyway, all right. So, well, let me tell you a story. I had a question come in from a student today. He's a second degree black belt, and he's working on that next level and trying to get his head wrapped around things. And the level where he's in is already the stage where things have shifted from technique to principles and concepts, right? You hear me say this all the time. As a matter of fact, the name of my academy and the overall umbrella of everything I do is Warrior Concepts International, right? I didn't put the word concepts in there so it sounded fancy, right? Ninjutsu is a system of principles and concepts. The models, the techniques, the skills are what the principles look like in any given moment. Okay? We're not just throwing words around. Well, that sounds cool. Nobody else says it like that. Bullshit, right? If I'm trying to do that to be creative and tricky, then I really don't understand what it is that we're doing. Okay. Anyway, all right. So let's get back to this story, right? So Chris sends me this thing based on a class that I did last night where people had this thing where they just kept getting stuck, especially upper level people, kept getting stuck on the technique, right? Technique would fail and they would stop mid-technique and look at their partner and go, shit, screwed that up. Let's do that again. Really? And I would look over and say, don't you ever do that again. You just disengaged mentally and physically in range. Yeah, I know it's my training partner. Yeah, I also understand that the way you train is the way you will fight. So don't ever disengage. I don't care if you made a mistake and you need to reset, then roll away, step away, leap away, get out of range, and then tell your partner, let's do that again, right? That's bare minimum. Don't ever disengage after a mistake or during a mistake. In range, like your attacker on the street is just going to let you go, oh, okay, that's cool, man. Let's start again. Okay. No. Okay. Well, I know, man, but Sensei, like this is my training partner, right? This is the dojo. I can make mistakes here. Yes, you can. Okay. But don't forget, there are mental mistakes as well. Okay. There's psychological mistakes. So the preferred thing that I would rather have a student do is they realize that the thing that they were trying to do is not working, but something else is available. They know what that is, and they just shift to that thing. Is that what we were working on? No, but that worked. And that is a skill that they're going to need on the street. Okay. So anyways, Chris sends this thing in. The technique we focused on last night is called Renyo. It's out of the Gyoko school. It's a variation of Koku, the first kata. And so he was doing some research on YouTube, right? And of course, people are showing it differently, seeing variations, right? So the question was, how many teachers have I had? Have they all had their own, like, do they all do it the same way? Or do they all have their own little nuances or whatever? And I explained that last night, right? And not only do they have their own little nuances, but Hatsumi Sensei has never said anything about people having their own little, not twist to it where it's radically different. There's just these little things because they're focusing on a certain variation, or they're starting their student at a certain point or way of doing it, right? Like I did last night. So, but we have to be careful that, well, like we learn the technique so we can learn the lessons that the technique is carrying, right? I want you to see your kata, your models, whether they're waza, kata, teacher just says, okay, we're going to work on this technique, whatever it is. They give you this example, and that's exactly what it is, right? Another translation for kata, other than form, is model, example, scenario, right? So what you need to understand is it's very much like a delivery truck, right? You ordered something from Amazon, and the delivery guy pulls up, right? Gets out, drops it on your porch, whatever. You go out, pick it up, bring it in, right? The Amazon delivery guy did not drive to your house, drive through the front door and park so you could enjoy whatever it was that you ordered. But that's how people tend to look at techniques, right? They get fixated on this thing. I call this Technique prison. Not prism, prison. It's like they're jailed. It's like they're stuck, right, in this box, and they can't get out, right? It always has to be done the same way. One of the variables that we changed last night was the timing, right? We changed something about it, put more force into a certain move, which of course caused his body to move farther, which then took him more time to execute the next piece. So there's a rhythm, and then all of a sudden that rhythm shifts, and then that rhythm comes back again, right? This is important. This is life. This is the breath of the fight, the ritsudo, okay? But not only do people practice the step by step the same way, but they practice the timing the same way, the rhythm the same way, the reason the same way. It's always done on the same side of the body, and they don't work the other side. They don't trade out punches for kicks or kicks for grabs or punches for knife stabs or whatever, right? We need to bring the technique to life. So anyway, problem one is that they get stuck right here. Like, this is the official way. I get it. At a certain level of training, okay? At a certain level of training. Remember that there's 3 levels of transmission for every lesson, every technique, every kata. There's 3 levels of transmission, right? I don't care if you see it shuhari or mechanics, dynamics, staging. I don't care what your model is, but it needs to shift, right? So we need to break from this, okay? But that also leads us to this idea where, again, let's get back to stick fighting, okay? The lesson for today is more general, but it's based on what I'm going to be focusing on Friday. So the Friday's class, right, is going to be focused on the 8 fundamental attack counters, striking methods from the Kukishinden school, right? One of the 9 schools within the Bujinkan. If you have Hatsumi Sensei's book, Stick Fighting, that he co-wrote with a guy named Quentin Chambers way back in the day, way back, right? It's the thing that leads everything off. You get past an introduction, and then there are these models, right? For those of you that have been around for a while, you might be kind of astute and look at this and go, but Sensei, I thought we had 9 striking angles, right? Why are there only 8 models? If I remember, I'll tell you at the end, right? I don't even have it in my notes, but I'll try to remember at the end, okay? So that took me a while to try to figure out, right? There are 8 models, and if you look at them, right, there's ski, right? There's this piercing one, but everything else is done inside, outside. So there's an inside version, there's an outside version. And if you pay attention to the line drawings, there's an angular change for each one. Like the angle's not exactly the same inside, outside. One side might go back or lateral, the other side goes forward, or one went back, one went lateral, whatever, right? So you have inside, outside, same maneuver with the stick, but if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, why is there 9? Because ski, you can do that left or right, but it's still the same move. It's not necessarily inside or outside, or is it, right? But why is there 8? Okay, talk about that. Often, again, we get books, first 10 readings through it. Hopefully you've read your book more than once, right? We just kind of take it at face value because we're trying to absorb what we can. But you go and you do some training and you come back and you read it again. And things aren't going to mean the same, right? They're going to mean something different than you thought they meant in the beginning. Or you're going to see things that you read the words, but how the hell did I miss that, right? Then you're going to take those things, you're going to go do some training, you're going to come back and reread it again. And every time you come back to it, assuming that you're actually training and you're not doing the same things the same way, you're assimilating these lessons, principles and concepts and whatnot. Every time you come back, this is how the scrolls work. As a matter of fact, one of the first lessons I learned as a white belt was my teachers were telling me. And again, I started in 1980, right? Late 80, early 81. And I know some of you guys weren't even born yet, but I'm old. So the first videos, right, on tape, VHS, right, didn't even hit the market until like 85 or 86. Okay, so all we have are books, prop the book open, weight it down, go by static, whatever, okay? But early on in my training, when they were referring to these things, right, everybody Jones is overseeing the scrolls, but the scrolls were just crib notes, right? I'm going to use a big word, what we were admonished to do, right? That is a heavy, heavy suggestion with implication of punishment if you don't carry it out. But they weren't going to punish us. We punish ourselves by making the choices or choosing to not choose, right? With everything, right? You get punished. Most people think about the rewards, but if you choose to not do something, like students who don't like rolling, so therefore they avoid it at all costs. And then a test comes around where they're required to do that proactively against somebody who's dumping them, and they have a choice. They catch up on their rolling skill, like it or not, or they quit. I know they say they're taking time off training. Yeah, quitting is quitting, right? So anyway, so what this technique prison tends to lead to, right? So Kukishinden, 8 models, right? If we're looking at those, the start position is always the same. The start position in a kata is always the same. Okay? In this case, it's called kata yaburi no kamae. Okay? 2 hands. I'm just going to borrow one of them. Yaito, right? It's just 2 hands in front, right? And it's always in gedan position. Right? Let me back up a little bit so you can see it. It's always in gedan position. But there are 3 positions that somebody should be working from just to start breaking from the basic. You've got gedan hirichimonji, chudan hirichimonji, jodan hirichimonji. It's still hirichimonji, right? Because the kamae is named for the weapon, right? Arms out, hirichimonji, okay? Actually, what is this? Yeah, hirichimonji, flat ichimonji, as opposed to ichimonji, right? So anyway, right, that should start to hint to where I'm going with this, because but either way, it's just a start position, and the partner is always squared off. So the attack always comes in from the same angle, right? But advanced students should already know that a lot of our stuff is heavily influenced by Tagagi Yoshin stuff. And so in Tagagi Yoshin, the attack is always from an off angle, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, whatever, because it's being done in an ikichigai kind of situation, where you're just walking along and passing by somebody, and they come at you from this odd angle, or even from behind, because your weapon draws out in this zone. So they get past that before they initiate the attack, and the attacks are initiated with a punch or a grab or something like that to destabilize you, instead of them drawing their weapon, which is going to cause you to draw yours. Okay? There's a whole bunch of tactics that are implied and need to be learned that are not written down in the kata. The kata is a snapshot in time. It's like when you click on a YouTube short, and then these yahoos try to make all kinds of comments about how that technique wouldn't work, how they would beat it or whatever, after having seen a 60-second or less snippet. They're arrogant enough to think they know everything about this thing, but all they keep doing is binge watching 10 to 60-second clips all day long. Mental masturbation. That's all it is, right? So anyway, if you can imagine jerking yourself off in your brain. Anyway, so there's another quote somebody can use, right? So the starting position is always the same. Okay, we're gonna talk about how these things kind of relate as we go along. I got little pictures and stuff, right? But again, kata yaburi, you can call it hiri shimonji, whatever. With the hanbo Kukishinden, it tends to be called kata yaburi, form breaking posture. Okay, so that leads us then into problem number 3, which is where's the working end of the stick that we need to strike with the moment we need to start the strike. Okay, so problem number 3 is that the striking end and I'm just going to make this a question. The striking end is where? Where is it in space, right? So if the basic model is here, so we can learn the basics of striking, so we can learn the basics of how we move things around. Let's see if I can't just knock things over, right? If we can learn the basics of each strike, right, as we go, that's all great. Given that somehow, right, Scotty from the Enterprise beamed this guy down in front of me, and as soon as he's fully materialized, he goes, and for whatever reason, I just happen to be standing around with a stick like this. Oh, and they were nice enough to beam him right there in front of me and all that, okay? But probably not. And even so, as this guy's moving in, if I see it happening and I have that stick, I'm probably going to start to profile to reduce my target, his exposure to my targets or his access to my targets. I'm going to be shifting things around. I'm going to be moving the stick from Hirichimonji into more of an Ichimonji, Seigan, Jodan, whatever, right? Position to guard to make his job more difficult. Now the stick's not in the same start position. Well, shit, now what do I do? Okay? So, but what are some of these things, right? What could put the stick in any given position? Okay? So, got 6 of them for you. Well, technically 5 because I always put a list expander at the end. But you know what? Let me write with a bigger marker here. I just want to make sure you guys can see this. I know there's a little bit of a glare on there. I try to cut it down, but I can't do anything with where the lights are positioned in the ceiling. So anyway, right? So what I just alluded there was him moving in and me breaking from Kata Yaburi to something that's more guarding, right? To inhibit his way of coming in, right? So I'm starting from another kamae. I'm not in Kata Yaburi, right? And this is the same in Kukishinden, or most of the staff things anyway. In Kukishinden school, when you do the kata, right? All the kata begin from Hirichimonji, and then you move to Ichimonji or one of these other kamae, and then you do the kata, and then there's a finish position, and then you return to Hirichimonji, right? So you start and end the same kamae, just like the global perspective for all of your training. You start with Shizen no kamae and you end with Shizen Tai, natural body, right? It's a full cycle, right? So anyway, I could be starting from some other kamae, right? I could be, I can't remember my own writing. I could be mid-strike, not his, mine, right? I could be starting a strike, and just as I start to go, he goes. You ever do that? You ever been sparring with somebody and you both throw like a kick or a punch or whatever at the exact same time, or close enough that you either hit each other or you end up stalling and then repositioning or whatever, right? Shit can happen. We have several kata related to sword that take into account this connection that would often happen, right? And people will see these things and go, "Oh, that's just like the movies, man, where they clang, clang, clang." No, they didn't do that kind of shit, right? What would happen is both people, one might be in Tenshiji no Kamae, one might be in Jodan no Kamae, and they both recognize a moment to move, and they go. So they're both doing kesagiri, right? This diagonal cut, and you end up with a stalemate position. So the kata is all about how do I get him without him killing me at the same time, right? How do I avoid mutual death in breaking this stalemate position, right? If we're focusing on that aspect, if we're just focusing on step by step, then it doesn't freaking matter, right? You can dance any way you want to dance. But I could be in mid-strike and have to change, right? So my stick is already traveling and the tip is in a certain place and I need to move. right? I could be at the end of a strike, right? That misses. We can't assume that we're going to be defending ourselves against a freaking moron, right? They probably have skills, right? Count your blessings if you're up against somebody who knows less than you do. But we're training in ninjutsu, right? Ninjutsu was developed so that the person or people who were supposed to be the losers, who were supposed to be the underdog, right? Overwhelming odds, okay, can still win. So coming at things equal or close or whatever, that's general Budo. Ninjutsu, that's for the times when you better have something in your bag of tricks because you're not big enough, fast enough, strong enough, young enough, armed enough, or whatever. And you still need to be, it doesn't relinquish you of your responsibility to win, right? To go home, to take care of your family, right? Let's see. How about the end of a technique, right? So it's the end of a technique. So it could be the end of a strike, but it's the end of a technique against a different opponent. Different opponent, right? So his ally, whatever, right? I just finished this guy who attacked me. Next thing you know, this other jagwagon comes off a bar stool and comes at me, or whatever, right? It was a multiple attacker scenario, whatever. I finished this one. Maybe I use my stick to do a ganseki, throw him, and so now not only am I in a different posture, but my relative position to him is completely off, right? So how do I execute? Just starting with these 8 fundamentals, how do I do these 8 fundamental techniques, these 8 fundamental attack counters, call them counter strikes, whatever, with the stick? Not from kata yaburi. Okay, how many different positions could I find myself in? The more of those things that I can recognize, I just covered this last night with my inner circle guys. There are 8 fundamental principles known as the happo, not kihon happo, although you can still call it kihon happo because it's a fundamental, right? Within the Gyokoryu. And these are not found in the Densho. These are not found in the Makimono, right? This was an extra treatise that Hatsumi Sensei got from Takamasa Sensei. These 8 pillars, right? One of them is called Ganho, okay? Ganho, right? Gan is eye, right? Just like Seigan, true eye, correct eye. But the other way to say Gan is Me, right? Like Metsubishi, right? Sight remover or attacks to the eyes. Anyway, right? So, but Ganho, it's not a technique. It ends up being a skill, but it's made up of sub-skills, right? Ganho is learning about your eyes. It's learning about how the eyes function so you can take advantage of, it's going to sound like a pun, but the blind spots in his sight, how to create sight issues or take advantage of sight problems, like, causing a flash of light to hit, pupils dilate. Most of us know that, but how often do you think about putting that into your technique before you initiate, right? But it's also how to look at things, how to look at the world, part of it is assessment, right? If you've been training with me for a while, we've got these 5 Ds: discern, defend, disrupt, deliver, discern, right? Discern is based on this Ganho. I'm paying attention to him. I'm doing a quick scan, head to foot or head to toe. I'm looking at clothing. I'm looking at the way he walks. And this is borrowed from another one of these 8 fundamentals, and it's how we use our legs and our feet. Okay, part of it is in how we train, but once we get that handled, or how the hands work, that's shuho, right? How the hands work and how you can use them and properly apply them. But that expands way out past the hands, right? But once I understand weaknesses and things that I need to fix in my movement, my walking, balance, and all that kind of stuff, I start to look at other people. I start to look at different ways to walk, different ways people use their legs. Is that strong? Is that balance nurturing? Does it cause a weakness, right? Are they heavy-footed? Whatever, right? because when I'm assessing, I'm watching how somebody moves their legs. I'm watching how they position. Right? And if I've studied taijutsu more than just techniques, and I'm understanding body dynamics and physiology and things like that, then I know whether I can do leg attacks or whether this guy is bottom heavy, top light, and so I want to do something that tosses him. I attack from the top down, right? Or if the guy's somebody like, and I'm just picking something, right? Tic-tac-toe, some boxing, some other types of kicking martial arts where they're very light on their feet, this kind of thing, right? Where they want to be able to get those legs moving very, very quickly. They're not very heavy down there, right? But they're very guarded up top. So, oh yeah, we can attack those legs. The person's bow-legged, pigeon-toed. If they look like they have a limp, right? Or they've been injured, okay? So this is, how do I look at things? Environmental considerations, okay? So anyway, what else do I have on here? Oh, what the hell do I have? Okay, so he's armed. What the hell does that have to do with it? Okay, well, I'm going to give you two examples. Okay, let's start with a knife, right? If I do certain ones of these strikes to the arm from a certain angle, inside or outside, specifically inside with a knife, right? It will shock his hand to open up. You see that? Causes the hand to open up, which can cause the knife to come flying out. And if I'm standing in that direction, or somebody I'm trying to protect is standing in that direction, guess what happens? Okay. So if they have a knife, primary answer is I want to go to the outside, because when it gets shocked from out here and the hand opens up, not only does it still opens up and goes flying away, but it's flying away outside the bubble, away from me and away from the person I'm trying to guard or protect. Okay. If it's a gun, same thing, right? But certain shots to the hand, like with a gun, I'm definitely going to the outside, because strikes back here that cause the fingers to open up move the trigger finger from the trigger. Okay. But if I hit a certain way that causes a covering pain response, that makes the hand clench up, which means the trigger gets pulled. I, or somebody I care about, can't be in front of that muzzle. Okay. These are all important considerations, right? And then I always throw my list ender down here because there's more. Okay. But wait, there's more. Okay. So anyway, all right. So moving from basic to advanced, right? There's variables, right? There's considerations that have to be worked in, right? Otherwise, we're a one-trick pony. Okay, I'm good at it, but like I've heard some people in this art say over the years, man, I always have to start with this kamae and this move, because if I don't, I'm lost. Yeah, there's a hell of a waste of time, effort, and money. So unless you're getting free training, like YouTube and all that, in which case, then it's only time and effort. Right? False understanding. Right? Anyway, right? So before I get, we'll talk about problem 4 here. Problem 4, I'll tell you another story. I've had people comment on some of my videos about certain maneuvers, certain techniques or whatever. And they're like, dude, all this fight science BS, all this, counter striking, timing and all that kind of stuff. Bullshit, man. Just put some gloves on, get in the ring and duke it out with somebody, right? All you have to do is throw a bunch of punches and hit him harder and more often than he hits you. And that's all you need. But isn't that what he's doing too? So if I'm fighting the same way he is, then, okay. But that just tells me this person's no more than 2 steps outside of the cave opening. Okay. So right? Caveman fighting with style. Okay. This is supposed to be enlightened self-protection. So problem 4 is just throwing something. All right. Doesn't matter. He comes in, I just hit him with the stick, and then I do the next thing, and I do the next thing, and I do the next thing, right? Couple this with soft training and a training partner who doesn't simulate the damage of a given strike, right? Because the rule of thumb, and all my students know this, the rule of thumb in stick fighting is that if there's a contest between a stick and a bone, the tree always wins, okay? But a good uke can simulate, they're not just giving you the attack, they can simulate the right, what that particular strike angle and whatnot does to the body, so that you're experiencing the same thing that you would experience in a fight. I was going to mention this earlier, but one of the jobs of an uke is to be a surrogate. You know, surrogate is, right? It's a stand-in, okay? We use them for, like, somebody else has your baby instead of your wife. She can't, whatever. They carry it because your wife doesn't want stretch marks or whatever, okay? But they're a surrogate. They're a stand-in, which means I need to make this training as authentic as possible, slow, safely, that kind of thing, because I don't want to damage my training partner. But there's only two ways to get the response that the technique is supposed to get. One, I get a really, really good training partner who understands how that works so they can simulate it, or I need to hit them to create it. I only have to do that once before that person either decides they're going to go train with somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, or they're going to get that they now know what that response is. So now they can simulate it without me having to crack a rib. Either way, win-win. Okay. So here's the next question, right? Why are there? We know why there's so many moves, right? Why is there this turning? Why is there this lateral strike? Why is there whatever? Okay, because the stick tip may be in certain places, right? So that's based on where the staff is. Okay, but why specific targets and why specific angling? Right? I'm not going to wait to the end. I mentioned this earlier, right? The techniques, the basic techniques, seem to move along like there's inside outside versions of the exact same move. So if it's a turning the stick over to strike directly down, if it's a lateral strike, there's an inside, there's an outside. But then if you look at the line drawings, either the artist sucked and it got past Tatsumi Sensei, and it got past the publisher, and it got past everybody else that's been reading it for years, right? Either it's an error or there's something to the fact that inside outside isn't the same angle. Or we have this stick turning one way or another way or whatever. Why? Okay, well, we've already talked about some of these, but what about armor? Okay, so we'll talk about that as we go along here, right? Why specific targets or why specific angling? Why not just throw something? We're in the middle of winter here. Okay, it's actually warmer than normal, and they're calling for an earlier spring, but normally, right, or a couple of weeks ago, we had this cold snap. Okay, boy, the coats got thicker, the clothing, the layers, all that kind of stuff, right? I hit somebody with something that works really well in the dojo because there's just a gi and, you know, whatever, right? And just always works, Sensei. Yeah, hit somebody with a parka, the same spot. See if they can even feel it. Okay, going after the ankle bone as a target or low on the leg. Hit those hikers. See if they even feel it. Okay, same thing, right? So again, Ganho, one of the primary pillars in the Gyoko school, which carries over to everything, right? Knowing how to see, knowing how to look, knowing how to assess, insight, foresight, all these things, right? That are all part of this Ganho, but being able to do a quick assessment and know where I need to be to access what targets, why, right? Those kind of things, okay? So just have a couple of them here, right? These are, for those of you who are watching that are my students, these are need-on considerations, right? Almost all of this is need-on considerations, okay? So we'll just spring off of this, okay? So the first one is just start position of the weapon, right? So that's all this, right? Okay. Number one is actually 5 or 6 things. Okay. Number 2 is the type of the attack. Okay. Attack type. Is he throwing a jab? Is he throwing this plunging, deep digging kind of thing? Is it a hook? Does he have a knife on the end of that hand? Right? Is there a brick or a block in it? Whatever, which is going to change because of the weight. It's going to change the dynamics and the positioning of how the arm moves. Right? Okay. So if it's going to be a quick out and back kind of thing, and I'm trying to swat this thing out of the air, 8 out of 10 times I'm going to miss. One of those I might nick it, but it's not going to do a whole lot more than piss him off even more. Okay, but I might hit it. I might hit it 1 out of 10 times in an okay way. But against jabs, I'm going to go for the body because the body's moving less than the arm is. It's moving slower than the arm is. Those kind of things, right? Same thing, jabs, hooks, whatever, right? Can I even access it? And if I can, what angle do I need to be on? That kind of thing, right? So next one, I already talked about this, right? His clothing, which includes accessories, watches, studded wristbands, like a biker, motorcycle helmet, hikers, whatever, right? He's wearing t-shirt, long underwear. I know those of you guys that live in really warm climates, you're like, okay, but what's he wearing? Okay, this is where a lot of people don't make the crossover when they're studying like Filipino arts, like Eskrima and Arnis and things like that, right? Rattan, sticks, sting. They do a lot of damage and whatnot. But you have to remember that martial art was designed in an area where they don't have cold weather. People are wearing no clothing, t-shirt, shorts, flip-flops, maybe whatever. That's going to be more effective than trying to do that against somebody who just jumped off a freaking motorcycle with a helmet and leather on. Okay, it's a different dynamic, right? But these are considerations for those of us who are looking at this for the same reasons that the past masters were, and not for ego gratification, mental masturbation, winning a tournament, impressing your friends, being on that infomercial. I don't know whatever. Okay, so so his clothing, accessories, right? Other types of armor. Okay, it's modern armor. Okay. Now, if you're actually a vet, you're in the military, you're a police officer, whatever, you might go up against somebody that's wearing actual armor, right? Flak jacket, Kevlar, whatever. I don't mean a Kevlar t-shirt. I mean like with the ceramic plates and stuff like that. Okay. All right. So we talked about this one, environmental considerations. Environmental considerations. So I'm not talking about the level of the land and stuff like that. That's maneuverability. That's footwork. That's tai sabaki, that kind of stuff. What I'm talking about am I in an area like I'm in my house or the porch, or I'm outside, I'm in a parking lot, or there's trees or posts around, right? And I can't get at him with certain strikes. That environment is going to minimize my options and which ones to use to be able to get at it. Okay, the alignment of his body based on where I am. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Okay, strategy. What's my overall strategy? Right. So if I'm doing a technique, when I'm doing a kata, one of the things that upper level or intermediate people need to start looking at in that hot level where they're breaking the kata is they need to reverse engineer it. So I go backwards, right? So and you don't necessarily have to, you're not doing it backwards. What I mean is when I do this uke nagash and the kata says do it this way, what's the next target that the kata says that's there, right? That's the reason for that uke nagash. But there's a certain amount of force that should go into it, because if I put too much, that target will move because I'm moving all of him. So if I'm supposed to hit it and then hit butsumetsu on the same side, and I smack the crap out of this and hit it too hard, aside from opening myself up, I spin him around and I move the target. And if he were punching quick 1-2, we just did this last night because people were doing their uke nagash way too hard. And if we looked at this idea of somebody fighting like this, not shoop, which is how the punches happened in armor. But you were both laden in armor, so you both moved the same speed. Okay? But on the street, right? Boom, right? So I do this uke nagash too hard on this, and even if I do hit it, right? As soon as he realizes he's missed or this has been hit, without even thinking, this one's coming out. So if my angling is off, my distance is off, or whatever, what I just did was hit this hard enough to spin his shoulders and cause this fist to hit me harder. Huh. I never thought about that, Sensei. I know, me either. Okay. And then a teacher came along and said, you know what I would do if I were, you know what, let me punch you. Okay? And I did that thing and bam. Oh, lesson learned. I didn't know I was supposed to quit when that kind of stuff happened because I'm not made of water. But anyway, so the strategy here is, where do I want him to end up at the end of this, right? Where's he supposed to be, right? So there's 3 variables with there, right? So strategy, okay. So where it's supposed to end up, but all of this together kind of points to 3 things, right? Each strike, right? Each strike is simultaneously an attack. Well, duh, Sensei, that's the obvious part, okay? But let's get the elephant in the room out of the way, right? Okay? I mean, obviously we're hitting somebody, so what the hell, right? Well, of course it's an attack. But that strategy thing, it's also a tactical setup for the next move that the kata says should be there. This is why a lot of people keep defaulting to fake henka. What I mean is, they always end up with their partner on the ground, but it's never the kata. Well, you know, Sensei, something changed. And yeah, I know. Stop parroting Hatsumi Sensei as a crutch or an excuse for not being able to do the technique right. Okay? Not you, because you guys are all enlightened, but you get the idea, right? So if the kata says the next move is something, then that strike not only has to be at a certain angle, it has to move him a certain way. It has to have a certain amount of force to it and whatnot, so the body is set up so that that next thing is easy. The kata never show you how to do something more difficult or something more tricky just for the sake of, right? You don't have time for that shit in a fight. You got like about 200 milliseconds or just under a quarter of a second to go from one to the next piece, because that's how fast a fight is. And if you've never been in one, that's a little help. For those of you who've been in one, then you already know that your training needs to lead to what you know. And you shouldn't be divorcing yourself from your experience because you're learning this cool stuff. Okay? Don't forget what you know. And if you've ever been in one, I don't care if it's a high school fight or whatever, you know how fucking fast shit comes flying. Okay? So be careful, right? So simultaneously, it's an attack, it's a tactical setup if we're using the science, right? And right back to that strategy, right? It's part of an overall strategy. Now, assuming that we're going past second degree black belt, because up to second degree black belt in my curriculum, 8th or 9th dan, in the way Hatsumi Sensei was promoting people and the way he told me they kind of matched up, okay? The strategy is don't die and go home. Sounds good to me, all right? So, but let's kind of come back to this. Start positions always off, technique prison, that kind of stuff, right? When it comes to striking, I keep bouncing back and forth between this thing that we're on Friday. I'm covering the 8 fundamental striking actions in the Kukishinden Hanbojutsu stuff, right? So, but I also teach 9 striking angles, right? So we've already covered the armor considerations, all that kind of stuff, right? But here's the thing. For beginners, the way we teach it and the way they think about it, regardless of whether we're throwing a leg, a fist, we're cutting with a knife, sword, hitting with a stick, whatever, we tend to look at the body, the attacker's body, square on. So what we show is downward strikes, upward strikes, lateral strikes, left and right, descending diagonal, ascending diagonal on both sides, and then I'm going to change color so it doesn't get lost in the mix here. Right? That's a piercing one, straight in. Okay. I got caught up in this. I'm hoping to teach this stuff in a way so that you can get past it faster than I did. Right. So this is looking at the body in general, right? But the reality is that these 9 striking angles can happen to any part of the body or not, because certain angles aren't going to access that side of the body, right? Coming in this way. But how many different ways can I access Butsumetsu? The kata shows this kind of a strike. But in the Koto Ryu, all strikes are 30 to 45 degree diagonal upward or downward strikes to either jam him down or lift him up, right? It could be a grazing shot. It could be a piercing shot, whatever, right? Because we have the different types of hits, okay? So what we're really looking at is these things hitting the arm unit, right? Down, right? Up, so dropping it straight down, hitting it straight up, knocking it, right, at an angle, right? So it would move one way or the other, right? Piercing shot, right? That could come straight in to hit, okay? Punches coming in, I shift out, do tsuki, punch him with the end of the stick, right in his fist, those kind of things, right? So again, we start to branch out, but it's not, this is an expedient. All of these things that we're given as a beginner, we have to drop along the way, or we have to expand our understanding, because it's an expedient to give somebody who knows little to nothing in a way that gets them started in the right direction. But it's been my experience, both because I got caught by it and because I watch students, it happen to students all the time, and I see it online in all these experts' videos, right? Where they're still stuck on the one way of seeing things. So let's take a look at a couple of training drills just to wrap this out, or a couple of training ideas. I'm going to give you no more than 2 here just to kind of get you started, right? So the first one is, I call it a limitation drill or a restriction drill, okay? And when I say drill, I mean like an exercise. Like this is not about self-defense. It's not a self-defense technique, but it has everything to do with self-defense. Okay, so it's a limitation or restriction drill. Okay, and you can do this with your unarmed techniques. You can do it with any weapon. It doesn't really matter, right? So what we're going to do, let's just, for all intents and purposes, we're going to say that we're going to pick one of these strikes. We're going to pick tsuki. Okay. The piercing or thrusting strike, right? So we're shifting and jamming, bang, right into something, okay? So what we're going to have our partner do is punch or kick or grab or whatever, and we're just going to evade at different angles, see what opens up, and practice tagging, right? That'll make sure that we're also getting good at piercing straight forward where we mean to hit, and not the end of the stick wobbling all over the place, and then we half-ass it, but we go home going, well, class was pretty good, okay? Because what we're going to do with this, we're going to start with big targets, torso, hips, spine, that kind of stuff, right? And then we're going to systematically change off targets, okay? We're going to add targets in, okay? But with a limitation or restriction drill or exercise, you're not allowed to do anything else. And this will happen when frustration starts setting in. I'm not good at this, so I'm just going to default back to what I'm already good at, because ego needs to be stroked, right? You need to keep ego tied up in a fucking corner so that you can actually get the skill down, instead of putting things off until what? The day I get attacked, and that's the technique or skill I needed, and now, right, pride goes before the fall. So what I'm going to start doing then, or I can, instead of just hitting anything, I can go, okay, it's going to be tsuki, and I'm targeting the arm, okay? Doesn't matter if he's punching or kicking. I'm going to target the arm, because if somebody's kicking or they're punching, I can target this arm in a whole bunch of different directions. From tsuki, I just have to figure out the angle to come into that thing. I can drop and hit up, right? Whatever, okay? Punch straight into this. Or I can avoid this one and tag the one that he's going to use next. Most people don't think about defending against the thing that's not coming yet. That's like dealing with a boxer. Somebody moves around like this, punch the shit out of his ulna, right? Make it difficult, because as you damage this, it affects all the way to the shoulder joint and the spine, okay? And now you can't punch so well, okay? You take away the guns that he's really, really good at. It's called disarming, okay? You take his weapon away from him. I know it sounds like a pun because I was just talking about disarm or dat arm, but you get the idea, right? So, but we could decide we're going to target the arm. So how do I ski? To the arm. So it is a punch with the end of that stick, okay? I'm not talking about lateral strikes with the side of the stick. I'm talking about ski. We're limiting ourselves to that. To the arm, to the torso, to the face or throat, to the leg, to the foot, to the side, the ankle bone on the side, right? Whatever, okay? Can I hit things? Can I hit the corners of the scapula as I flank this guy and it's right there? So do I know where that is based on the contour of his body through his clothes? That's called insight. Okay? I can see inside something that would normally be invisible. Foresight is training with this stuff again and again and again, so you end up knowing where he will be when he gets where he's going based on his size, his fight style, the way he throws punches, those kind of things. You know where things will be when they get where they're going, so you stop chasing things and you just meet them there. That's called foresight, right? This is all part of that Gan hole, right? In the that one pillar in the Gyoko school, okay? So anyway, so this is a limitation or restriction drill. If you're doing it unarmed, you could just say, look, I can only use my shito. I can only use my knife hand. So anytime I make contact with his body, it has to be this. Then you're going to realize that just throw something, you're going to land solid hits at certain parts of the body, but they do absolutely nothing because of the way the body is naturally armored. That strike won't work against that target from the angle you just did it. Might it work from another angle? Maybe. Depends on the target. Okay? But this is stuff that is not written in the kata. But it's the other 90% of the training that absolutely has to be gone through if we're getting to that word. To most people, that word is just trickier stuff. I can do it faster. I can do more complicated things, whatever. No, that is being able to do your basics so well. Bruce Lee said, I'm not worried about the person who knows 50 kicks. Okay? And the 50 kicks are average. I'm worried about the guy who can do a kick 50 times, right? The guy that's practiced 500 kicks a time or three, as opposed to the guy who's practiced 1 to 3 kicks or whatever 500 times. Okay, it's the same thing. I want to get good at ski. I want to get good at each one of these things in different contexts. So not only do I know how to do them, but I know also when that's the shittiest possibility or the shittiest technique I could ever try to do in this situation. Okay, I call that mathematical martial arts. When people go, well, the defense against a punch is, really? What kind of punch? How tall is he relative to you? So what angle is the punch coming in on, right? How does he throw the punch, right? All those kind of things. Why is he throwing it, right? Is it a jab? Is it a cross? Is it a lunge? What kind of clothing is he wearing? That kind of stuff. That's infantile answering when somebody goes, well, the defense against is really interesting. You've never been in a fight, and if you've been in fights, they've all been the same. Okay? So another way to do this, another training drill with this, is to do what I call an obstacle exercise. What color am I using here? Right? Okay, an obstacle exercise, and then it doesn't matter in one instance here, it doesn't matter what you're doing or what strikes or whatever, but you guys are moving around. If you've ever tuned in virtually or been here live for certain seminars or training or classes or whatever, as students are training, I start bringing chairs from the viewing area, start bringing our big stand-up bags and stuff and dragging them into the middle of the floor, or I'll make a box and keep closing it in on people where they've only got so much space. There's other moving bodies, there's obstacles that they could trip over, whatever, and they've got to operate and do things in there. Okay. One of the things we didn't put in here based on why we would do a certain strike, right, are other bodies. Right? What if the strike that's my favorite requires me to pass through a certain space to get to him, but my 4-year-old grandson is standing there, or my wife is right there, or whatever. And I either hit them in the process because I'm blinded by rage or fear or anxiety or whatever, or I can't take the shot because I know I'm going to hit them and I or we die in the process. That's a fucked up outcome. Okay. My perspective. Okay. That's an acceptable loss. I can get a new wife. Maybe so. Unless her brothers or whatever coming. Anyway, so this is what I have. We're gonna do part 2 this Friday. So it's $4.99 US, right? Do the class. You get the recording afterwards. Most of the people that sign up for it, in all honesty, because of work schedule, where they live in the world or whatever, they're all getting the recording anyway. But those who show up, the extra benefit is, have a stick and you can do things in the air. If you have a training partner, that's great. But I can watch. I can give you feedback. So, right, I charge $150 an hour for group training. So for $5, you're getting your technique assessed. You don't have to take the assessment. I mean, you can say, you know what, and I've had people tell me this, right? Well, this other teacher told me that I can get away with that thing. These are not the exact words, right? They told me I can do that because that's fine. And I go, well, listen to whoever you're going to listen to, okay? That's a choice. We are free to choose. We are not free from the consequences of our choices. Almost sounded like a politician there. I apologize. Anyway, that's what I had this time. Hopefully I'll see you on Friday. If not, hopefully I'll see you next week for our next episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. See you.